Welcome to Eagles Fan Wagon. This is your host, Erik Hansel. In this episode, we recap our rapid reactions following a 26-24 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. With me is Greg Myer, who is ready to talk about free agent grades, our slow start, and that critical 4th and 1 play at the end of the game. All this and much more just ahead. Welcome to the Week 1 podcast. This is Erik Hansel of Eagles Fan Wagon. We have Greg Myer on the line. We're ready to talk about this Atlanta Falcons game that just ended. And Greg, I'll let you take it. One of the first things I think comes to mind is the fact that we started the game so slow.
Yeah, and it's reminiscent of last season where we start the Jacksonville game 17-0. All of a sudden, we're in a 20-3 hole at halftime. Falcons are getting the ball back, and I'm wondering, are we a terrible team? Is the preseason a myth? And sure enough, we come back, but not in the same kind of fashion that we did in the Jacksonville game. So I'm wondering now, are these slow starts symptomatic of Chip Kelly? Or is the way his team performs at the NFL level that they start slow and that they flourish at the end? Or is this particular slow start more a symptom of new cast members in not a new offense, but for them it is. Right. And basically what I'm wondering is, are we going to see this team jive in the second quarter, or jive going throughout the rest of the season like they did in the second quarter?
Right. Part of the problem that football, I think, suffers with is that you have such a lack of data. So baseball, you have 162 games. When a guy bats .338, you're like, wow, he's really going to get a hit 338 times out of 1,000. You know what to expect. But in football, you don't know what to expect. And we have 2 season data points with Chip Kelly, where you look back at last season, we were down 17-0 against Jacksonville in Week 1. I believe we were down 10-0 against the Colts in Week 2. I don't think we actually started the game with a lead until either Week 3 or Week 4. We started that season 9-3. You reverse a season. You look back at what they came out against Washington in Week 1 in 2013. We were losing that game 3-0 at the very least. I believe 10-0 at half.
Definitely 7-0 because of the return touchdown.
There you go. So point being, I think your question is, right, what should we expect to see from Chip Kelly in the third season? And the truth is, I don't know that either of us know enough to make a bold prediction. But it seems to me that Chip Kelly is at least someone that, hey, seems like his whole strategy is we will wear you down in the second half. And this is something we'll talk about later. But if you're going to wear a defense out in the second half, then you had better be prepared to go for it on 4th down.
Well, yeah, and lots more to come and from me on that especially. But to me, the big question is he going to start games more like we did? I feel like we saw more in the first season. The Lions game, the Washington game to open the season, we still saw slow starts, and he did wear you down. But I guess what gave me a glimmer of hope was seeing the way when I feel like the play calling changed a little bit.
Agreed.
They abandoned the run, and not abandoned it to the point where they never ran the football, but abandoned it as a first down option. Abandoned it as a way to reliably get yards. It was more of a mix-up to me in the second half.
Yes.
You get Bradford in that short throw rhythm where he's so smart, he's so accurate, and he just gets in his zone. Is he just working it out with his receivers? And now, we have a full game's worth of action. Great job, guys. Sucks we're 1-0 or 0-1. Let's go get Dallas next week and just blow it out from there.
Right.
That's where I have a little more hope than I did last year, where it was a clear regression with Foles.
Right.
Clear regression with McCoy, clear regression with the offensive line.
Right.
And this year I'm like, okay, maybe though, just maybe, and hopefully it's the first game of the season. Ertz wasn't in the preseason. Some of these other people weren't in the preseason. We're working out the kinks, And now we're really going to start firing.
So let me bring up a point that I thought was present throughout the game. And this was that the offense seemed to have absolutely no timing on offense. Let's rewind to the first half. We have Ertz over the goal line for a catch, and what does Bradford do? Bradford sort of overthrows him. Maybe Ertz should have made the catch. To me, it was indicative of a play where you have a new quarterback in a new system, and new system meaning new professional system, because we know that Bradford ran this type of system in college. But this was Bradford and Ertz's first game together. And so a receiver, I know he's a tight end, but a receiver on the play and the quarterback have no ability to really try something out before. And yeah, of course, we heard in the preseason how great their performance was together, and it seemed like this was almost a new Romo Witten-esque thing, but really they had no ability to work out these close timing plays together. And you saw that play. You saw Huff being hit in the back with a pass. And there were a lot of timing plays on offense where I thought that neither the quarterback nor the receiver nor the offensive line really seemed to be totally communicating with each other. And I have hopes for the season going forward where, hey, maybe in the future Josh Huff will know to turn around, pick up a pass, get a first yard. Maybe Zach Ertz knows the pass is going to come a millisecond early. He'll have both hands up, not just his left hand up, not his dominant hand, ready to catch the pass. But as a week one season, I expected a lot more timing, especially from Chip Kelly as a guy that controls the tempo, as a tempo guy who made his professional living in Oregon to get to the NFL to be a guy that relies on timing. I expected a lot more of these Philadelphia Eagles in week one.
Yeah, and Chip Kelly's play timing is a different story. I think Chip Kelly gets into his own rhythm. And you can see that with the play calling and the way things unfolded in the second half. But yeah, to your point, we probably forget that one of this first pass of the game, I think maybe it was the second pass of the game, is Ertz looks like he goes the wrong way. He should have broken to the outside where Bradford had the ball waiting. That could definitely be a factor in Ertz missing time in the preseason, them not getting real reps against other teams, especially first-team defenses. The Austin thing, that's more of a drop. I don't think that's a timing issue. The ball hits you on the hands, that down the middle where maybe you have a touchdown. But also, I felt like Bradford was looking deeper more in the first half, where that's something I would really like to see him work up to in the course of the first half via the small throws he did 6 yards down the field to either receivers and running backs. And also to your point, I felt like he had a great rhythm with Jordan Matthews. I don't know what the stats are, but Jordan Matthews had a ton of catches. Unfortunately, his last drop was the fatal one, which was a fine throw by Bradford, but they were in rhythm. So maybe a little bit of cause for hope here, where you see what it looks like when Bradford and his receivers have time to work together.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that there's definitely a lot of hope on the horizon, but certainly, you have however many weeks of the preseason, you have however many weeks of training camp, you have 4 weeks of preseason. You have got to expect that at least by the time that week one rolls around, you'll have certain timing issues figured out, and you don't.
Yeah.
And is this a cause for concern? No, the other thing that I think was somewhat interesting was how porous the offensive line was.
Yeah, and first half in particular, but the inability to get the running game going hurt us so much. It was clearly part of the game plan. And then when it's just taken away from you so brutally, I mean, those first few runs and swings out to DeMarco Murray were just so tough to watch. We were getting, not even blitzed. It's just 4 guys breaking through and then the rest of the defense following. It was really brutal to watch. I think that was definitely part of the rhythm issues with Bradford and his receivers, the fact that there was no running game, but we were expecting there to be a running game. Clearly the coaching staff thought there was going to be, and I'm kind of worried, less so after watching the second half, but definitely worried about that O-line. Harriman's gone, Mathis gone. All I've been hearing from the Philly media is no big deal, really. Gardner looks like the guy. He wasn't tabbed, but he was quote-unquote tabbed early on as the guy. And, Kelsey Johnson, Peters, still great.
But even
linemen.
Peters got burned
by Beasley. In the second quarter. But and it's where it's so hard to tell because that second half was such a different story. Peters is dominating again. He steps out for a play, comes right back. Has to scare us all to death. But yeah, so my question was at halftime. It was what's going on with the O-line, what's going on with the D-line. The D-line looked like they bounced back a little bit. 6 points from the Falcons in the second half. But the O-line still, to me, Bradford was still getting hit. He was still getting pressured. That's why we were in the situation we were, the play of the interception, instead of potentially in a better situation, with fewer yards to get. But, yeah, to me, the O-line, not as much of a concern as it is still a question mark.
Yeah. I think the way I see it is there are sort of 3 layers on offense and there are 3 layers on defense, right? You look at the defense, you have sort of the safeties, the kind of out there folks in the secondary. You have the linebackers, which sort of are the second line, and you have obviously the defensive front line, right? And then on offense, you have sort of the same thing. You have these wide receivers, deep talent. You have these sort of tight ends that have sort of played this middle game, and then you have this, the offensive line, and you have, say, running backs or quarterbacks or whatever you have. I think there are a lot of question marks sort of throughout the field. And one of them that I saw throughout the game was just how lost the Eagles' secondary was. So I'll name 2 names. Number 1, I thought Malcolm Jenkins had a great game. He's not someone I'm talking about when I'm talking about us being lost. But there were 2 people that I thought consistently looked burned, consistently looked gassed, and just consistently looked lost. And they're Byron Maxwell and Nolan Carroll. And with Nolan Carroll, look, I think we all knew the Eagles had question marks coming into the slot receiver coming into the season. But when you pay a guy $63 or $66 million, 22 of which are guaranteed, the big marquee free agent signing.
You're talking Byron Maxwell.
I'm talking Byron Maxwell.
Yeah,
that was a disappointing game. I can't name really a single time where he got the better of Julio Jones. And look, Julio Jones is a world-class receiver, right? Yeah. You're talking about him. He is going to be the top of the league every year in his prime. I don't care. But still, if you're going to sign the biggest free agent cornerback in the offseason, you have got to expect him to stop Julio or at least not make Mike Tirico and John Gruden bring up Julio Jones's name every play.
Yeah, and well, first of all, I'm very glad that you didn't mention Malcolm Jenkins in the cast of a poor play from the secondary, because what would we do without Malcolm Jenkins? But I have to play a little bit of devil's advocate when it comes to Byron Maxwell, and here's why. First of all, we heard his name a lot for bad reasons in the first half. He got burned. The guy he was supposed to be shadowing in Julio Jones scores 2 touchdowns, lots of long gains. Roddy White, when he's covering him, scores, or not, doesn't score, but gets a bunch of long gains, right? But then, here's one play he did great. 3rd down, and, between 8 and 10, he come on a comeback route to Jones. He knocks the ball away, looks pretty good. And here's the other thing. We don't really hear his name much in the second half. And what else is going on in the second half? Our offense is playing offense. Look, here's the Eagles' offense. We were just tired before, and now we're back, right? Or whatever it is with them. Our D-line is actually breaking through a little bit. There's really no running game to speak of in Atlanta. I mean, so again, it's so tough to diagnose this team. It all goes back to my question. Are we just a team that starts slow? And that really sucks if we are. I don't want to be. I want to be the team that starts fast and just keeps our foot on the gas the entire game.
Right.
We're clearly not yet. But with Byron Maxwell, he got burned by some great receivers where he's playing them one-on-one, where our touted D-line is not getting into the backfield. Am I ready to write him off? No.
Yeah.
Do I think he had a poor game? Absolutely he did.
Yeah.
But we didn't lose the game because of Byron Maxwell.
No, absolutely the case. We did not lose the game because of really, I think, any one player, though I will say that one of the things that we have to talk about as costing us the game is the clock management and the fourth down play at the end. So let's briefly recap what happens, right? The Eagles go up 24-23 late in the game. I believe it's with about 10 minutes left, right? And the Eagles then give the ball back to Atlanta, who comes down and scores a field goal to go up 26-24. And then you have sort of this weird game of, okay, the Eagles receive the ball on offense, and they have all of the time left. I don't want to say all the time left in the world, but certainly enough for a long drive to bleed the clock to come back and win the game. And the question at the time becomes, are you going to score a touchdown or are you going to score a field goal? And the critical thing that happens is that the Eagles get into a 4th and 1 situation, and they go for the field goal. And there were a lot of things that seemed wrong about that. First of all, was the call for the field goal unit to come onto the field happened far too late, really giving your field goal unit very little time to prepare. And thing number 2 was, my goodness, this was a long field goal. By no way was this a chip shot where you can go up 27-26, sort of put your defense, give them the ball at the hand, or the control at the end of the game. This was really risky by every maneuver. And my question to you is, why don't you go for it on that 4th and 1 play?
And my answer is I have no idea. If they get the field goal and their defense holds, I think we still talk about it a little bit, but we're happier. But that's not the case. And yeah, my big question here is you don't get it on 4th down. You're in a pretty similar position as if you kick the field goal and give it back to them. Not that different. You still have a potent offense with 4 minutes left, and they're down by less than a touchdown. So to me, it's no question. But the thing that's lost when you talk about it that way, when you talk about the situation in the game, and you can do all your analytics that you want, but if you go back and watch that drive, do we have one play where we didn't go forward?
Very few.
Maybe a penalty. I mean, we killed ourselves with penalties. But when you say that, really the only penalty that killed us was the Kiko Alonso defensive, illegal touching in the first half. Because in the second half, yeah, we had penalties. That just meant that we had more yards to overcome on the way to scoring touchdowns, which to me made it even more impressive, but also even more of a question mark of what this team is. But we go forward every single play that drive. That defense is on its heels, and if we get that first down, forget about scoring a touchdown and giving the Falcons back the ball. Forget about scoring a field goal with little time left. You just have options. You have so many more options, and the downside to not getting it is so similar to the upside of kicking a field goal, to me.
Agree.
And I'm here sitting, we lost the game because of the missed field goal and then an interception, but that's a different story. To me, the game is that call. That call is the game, and that also was very reminiscent of how Chip Kelly managed the clock in his first home game against the Chargers. I don't know if many people thought of that, but just clear poor calculation on his part.
For those of us that don't remember, can you kind of talk a little bit about what happened in that Chargers game so we can remember?
Yeah, I will say, first of all, that was one of Michael Vick's best passing games. Probably people don't remember it because it was a loss, but we go ahead and we give the Chargers, who have been shredding our defense, familiar story, shredding our defense, we give them the ball back with a minute and a half. And we go ahead by, I can't recall the exact, but I remember being so mad at the clock mismanagement because he either does his high tempo speed, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Even if we score, we're screwed. We could, if you go back and watch this game, we could not stop them. There was no question of stopping them. Of course we don't. It's very much like how we lost the last game of that season against the Saints. We just can't stop them. They go down, kick the field goal. It's enough of a deficit. Time expires. We're done. But it felt kind of like that. Like, why are you doing this? Because maybe I just am so jaded from being an Eagles fan that I can see every possible path to defeat. But to me, the clear path of defeat was trying to kick the field goal on that. And I don't care about anything else except our offense was going forward every play.
Right.
We run the ball, we're good. Forget about the running game woes. If we run the ball on that 4th and 1, we get it. Bradford could run it. We get it. Give him the ball, let him roll out. It doesn't matter. We get it.
That was a drive where, you compare it with what we had going on in the first half. In the first half, it seemed like we couldn't get any yards. We barely had any first downs. We were almost always forced to punt the ball. But then you go into this last drive, and you're right. You have completions. You have people moving the ball forward. We were moving the chains at ease, but more importantly, we were really moving the line of scrimmage at ease. And when you have a case where all you need is 1 yard, and if that 1 yard then gets you in a better position to score a touchdown, or at the very worst, in a better position to go for the field goal, that just has to seem like the right way to play the game, right? You play to win the game, and this has to be the right decision. And Chip hesitated. He hesitated. He knew that maybe, there's a question here. Let's go for the field goal. It seemed to me that the field goal choice was really something that was too risk averse, right? It's almost like you can lambaste the Philly coaches in the Philadelphia radio the next morning if they go for it. If they don't, you kick it, you missed it. Maybe you can talk about the kicker, but absolutely no. To me, that was the critical decision. You have to go for it there. As we tweeted, you have to go for it. This was a critical error by the Philadelphia coaching staff and a really critical point of the game.
And the point you bring up, I think, is a great point, the hesitation. Maybe that's what frustrates me the most, is he knew. I feel like he must have known that maybe it ended up being 49% of his crazy, mad scientist calculation said go for it, where 51 was kick the field goal. But he knew and seriously considered it, and it's the right call in that situation. It's so easy to say from here, but I said it from there when we were watching the game before it even happened, and was furious before I even saw the result that we had not taken advantage of this very tangible thing in pro football that is momentum. And our offense had it. Our defense had it. What worries me most potentially is that he won't learn from it, because that wasn't the thing that came back to bite us. But
right.
But that I think was the defining moment, is where we were timid, where we didn't press our advantage.
Right.
And we sat back in our heels and we said, let's just take this safe thing, which we didn't get, but we didn't do what I think a lot of people would have liked to do regardless of the result.
Right.
Press our advantage, be aggressive, and go for the clear victory, the clearest path to victory.
Part of me has to worry or wonder is I am curious about whether or not that decision-making changes depending on what week we're in. So, for instance, this is week 1. Chip knows he's not going to get fired in week 7 or in the current week, right? It's week 1. Why would you ever turn over the coach in an offseason like what we've had? But let's say the Eagles are 9-7 and they need this is a must-win game. This is essentially a playoff game, and he's faced with that same decision. Wouldn't you then think, wouldn't your mind frame say, hey, we have to go for it? Now, similarly, this is week 1, and by no means is this a must-win scenario. You know, we have 15 games left in the regular season before anything is decided. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that we have every opportunity in the world to go 15-1, right? This was a team that was 9-3 last year and ended up going 10-6 and missing the playoffs. This is a very long season. But when you look back at it and you say, my goodness, this was a week 1 game. In week 1, maybe we're a little bit more relaxed. Maybe we'll kick the field goal here on a 4th-and-1 situation, when really, if it's week 17, you would go for it, right? And I saw that decision-making complex by our coaches, and it got me quite worried. So let's peel back from this terrible 4th down decision-making scheme, and let's talk about looking ahead to week 2. what are the things that are good to talk about? What things can we say, hey, this was pretty good in week 2, or at the very least, when we had things rolling, this was working for us? What are some positives that we should expect to see in week 2?
So you alluded to it yourself in an earlier conversation, which was the fact that in the first half, Sam Bradford looked like a pedestrian quarterback having a subpar game. In the second half, I didn't think that was the case. I thought in the second half, I saw why Chip Kelly wanted Sam Bradford. It was quick, smart, accurate throws. That's really all you could ask for. None very deep, but even the few times that he didn't air it out, but he threw it a few yards downfield past the first down marker, thought it looked pretty good. So that's what we can look forward to. We could potentially look forward to also a Chip Kelly who thinks a little differently in terms of his pass to run ratio. I don't think he really cares about that number. He clearly didn't if you look at the whole body of work from this game, especially in the second half.
Right. I'll just interrupt you very quickly. I agree with you as a part of the whole game that he had a decently balanced offensive attack, but in the first half, he only had 5 runs, right? So I agree with you. As a whole part of a game, he has a very balanced attack, but I think what we are prone to seeing is sometimes that balance being thrown off kilter.
Yeah, and I actually think in the second half, it was less balanced towards the run.
Oh, wow.
I think that he abandoned the run, and I thought it was great. I thought he had these quote-unquote running plays, what these announcers will call running plays, but they were short, quick, smart, accurate, give your athletic guys a chance in a little bit of space. And I mean, we saw what guys like Jordan Matthews can do. We saw what guys like Darren Sproles can do. We saw what Ryan Matthews could do when he catches the ball. I think that's where you go. That's a run. If you have a quarterback that's as accurate as Sam Bradford showed us that he was, and again, I didn't think he had a bad game. He had 2 picks. 1 pick should be a stat on the wide receiver. And another one was definitely a pick and a bad decision, but he was also getting clobbered by, again, another point we referenced, the porous O-line. So I think going into this next week against the Cowboys, you have this philosophy of, I don't care about pass-run balance. I don't care about 50-50 split. If you're Chip Kelly, you're already bucking those numbers anyway. You're already bucking all that kind of thinking. Why do it just because that's what we've done before? Give your guys a chance to make plays in space. And what the Eagles did in the second half was they did that through the passing game. They gave their guys a chance to make plays in space. That wasn't happening on the runs. Sure enough, it opened more running lanes later down, as the game progressed, as they worked the passing lanes. But I would love to see that, just as the philosophy going into next week, because that's what worked.
Right.
That's what I saw our team get success with when we got 21 points in the second half, and we had every single drive except for the interception and the missed field goal, which unfortunately were our 2 last goal drives, and in touchdowns in the second half.
Right. Let me ask you a question very quickly on Bradford, and that is that entering the season, really entering the preseason, I think everyone in Philadelphia held their breath. And that anytime a defender got close to Bradford, whether it was Terrell Suggs with the famous flag that maybe or maybe shouldn't have been a penalty in the preseason, and then really the first pop of this season where he gets leveled in one of the first drives, are you more or less concerned now about Bradford's health after game 1 of the season versus what we knew coming into this game?
It's a good question. I think I'm less concerned.
Why?
The reason is because the preseason is such an illusion, and you never know what you're seeing, and all that can happen is bad things, namely players getting hurt. So his 10 for 10 game, it means nothing. He didn't get hurt. That's great, but really all I'm thinking is, okay, is he gonna? But now I saw a quarterback. Sam Bradford's a football player. He's a big enough guy. He's a strong enough guy. He's going to take hits. Yeah, he's going to get hit on a number of plays per game. He's a quarterback. He's an NFL player. He is not a porcelain doll, right? So I feel more comfortable. I was watching a real quarterback out there, and his stats won't show a great game. I thought he had a pretty good game considering the circumstances, but I also thought this to me wasn't about a test. Can you take a hit and get up? Dude's been taking hits his whole career. Yeah, he got hurt on 3 famous ones, but I don't know. If you play the odds, he's probably the least likely guy to go out with an ACL injury.
Yeah.
He's not... I don't know. I don't know what the odds are. Basically, what I was encouraged by was I saw a guy who was getting up after every play, not, wincing, not complaining, just an NFL quarterback.
Now, one of the things is that an NFL quarterback has to do, other than just say, stay healthy, is an NFL quarterback has to rally the troops around them. And we traded away Nick Foles for Sam Bradford. And something that I think we saw out of Nick Foles really from his first game against Tampa Bay, where he throws a game-winning touchdown to end a horrible Philadelphia losing streak in Andy Reid's last season. And we saw last year against Washington when Jason Peters absolutely lights up a Washington Redskin defender as defense to Nick Foles, is we saw Nick Foles have an ability to sort of inspire the guys around him. And if I have any knock against Sam Bradford, because I'll tell you what, I'm willing to throw a little bit of the first half away. That is, here's a first guy's game back to the NFL in 2 years. I'm willing to say you'll be a little bit rusty. I was impressed by what I saw in the second half. But something that I never saw, no matter what time in the game it was I never saw a guy yelling at his offensive players to get them inspired. I never saw a guy yelling at his offensive players to get back to the line. I did not see that Tom Brady element. I did not see that Peyton Manning element. I did not see that gamer element where you are the captain of the team. Did I see a guy that completed passes? Sure. Did I see a guy that was able to make quick decisions? Sure. Did I see a guy that, frankly, was surprisingly mobile? I mean, at the very worst, he was just as mobile as Nick Foles. But the one thing I might fear about with Sam Bradford is that I did not see him possess an ability to lead the guys around him.
It's a question mark also for me. He didn't really get a chance to. He played well enough to win. Especially, I think, impossible to deal with ifs and would've, could've, should've. But, Jordan Matthews catches that ball. We might be having a different conversation. We might be talking about his leadership skills.
Miles Austin catches that ball early. Right.
A lot of different things can go on. And, yeah, I didn't see much in terms of being demonstrative, right? He's not D'Amico Ryans out there. He's not going to pump guys up. He's definitely not Brady out there on the field or on the sideline. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so yet. I think guys who work hard and try to master their craft get the respect of those around them, regardless of their leadership style. So if that's how Sam Bradford is a leader, by working hard and by trying to be a perfectionist and by trying to get everything right, and not necessarily by waving his hands and getting worked up on the sideline, that's fine. Nick Foles didn't get that worked up on the sideline. He was clear every now and then he'd have a little moment of pizzazz. But for the most part, he was pretty low key. I think Bradford's a similar guy, but Bradford knows how to be on a football team. You go back to high school or Oklahoma or even St. Louis, I'm sure he had some kind of leadership role, even if it wasn't the one who was in your face about it, right? So I'm not worried from that standpoint. I'm also not worried just because I didn't see it manifest itself on the field that he wasn't a leader. I saw a guy who led in the most important sense of the word when it comes to football, who led his team down the field and who was continuing to lead his team up until the last moment. If you are a fellow football player, really, how can you want more? You don't have to be best friends with the guy.
Yeah, sure. I'll agree with that. So let's get into maybe two more things before we make a little prediction about next week. And that is, I want to make some offensive and I want to make some defensive grades for the game. So to me, the Eagles had really 5 key and critical offseason moves. And they were Bradford, Murray, and Matthews on the offense. And they were Maxwell and Alonso on the defense. So can we give grades in terms of how well they played, or maybe talk a little bit about what we should expect to see next week?
Yeah, it's so tough just because everything starts with the lines for me, and every guy you just named is affected in some way by those lines. But yeah, we can give general grades relative to our expectations, I think. So Bradford, I would probably give a B.
Yeah, I'm probably in the B- range. I say B- if only because I was expecting to see more leadership, and I really had my expectations through the roof on this game. Here's a guy that's number 1 overall draft choice. We've heard about his athleticism. We've heard so much about him in training camp, about his ability to be an incredibly accurate quarterback. And really, if there's any knock against Nick Foles, and if anything, why we traded Nick Foles away, was because we thought that we had some sort of better option with respect to the deep ball. I did not really see any deep option this game. Did we miss Jeremy Maclin? I'm willing to believe it. But when we have a guy like Nelson Aguilar, Jordan Matthews, just not really being on the same page as the quarterback, I have concern. I'm going to give him a B+. Let's move on to Murray. For me, Murray, I thought he impressed in the red zone. He had obviously 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving, 1 rushing. But, he's a guy that I was disappointed in his sweep game and certainly expected more, especially you want him to be a guy that you can trust on 4th and 1. So again, I'm going to actually give him a B- once again. He's someone that can definitely redeem himself sort of later on in the season, but I just expected more out of a key free agent marquee signing. I was hoping to see more.
I actually have to give him something like a B+. And the reason I have to go there is because the second thing I talked about was offensive line play. You could be, Joe Schmo and have a great game at running back if you have a dominant O-line. We did not have that. Murray didn't have a great game. He did score 2 touchdowns. So I think a B+ is fitting also because I saw him do what he was brought in to do. He didn't call sweep plays, but he ran them, and when he saw north-south openings, he took them. He also isn't in charge of blocking schemes, and when somebody met him in the backfield, maybe he only got a yard, maybe he lost a yard, but he went forward from where he was met every time. So I have to up my grade for him than what I would want to give him based on stats and based on expectation versus reality, because he was doing what you bring him in to do. If everyone else doesn't do what they're supposed to do, it's going to be hard for a guy like a running back to do that. He had great success under a great Dallas line. If we don't have a similarly good line, he's not going to have great success. But he was going north-south. Even on that touchdown catch, he's looking at the end zone. That's how he scores. He's not looking at a defender. He's looking to go straight ahead.
Right.
And that will behoove him, I think, in future weeks.
So let's round out the offense and talk about what we saw from Ryan Matthews. Now, he is someone that I think that a lot of people in Philadelphia thought would have a really incredible season. And I think almost part of that was we sort of expected DeMarco Murray to, I don't want to say lag, but when you have as many carries as you did last season, you sort of expect the workload to be split maybe a little bit more evenly. Now, considering what my expectations were for Ryan Matthews, I'm willing to give him a solid A-. I was impressed by the athleticism. I was impressed. There was a call early where there is a flag on the play and it gets brought back, but Matthews was able to catch a ball, receive a ball, juke out enough defenders, get first downs. I was impressed by his ability to move the chains and keep the offense moving forward. He's also a surprisingly Sproles-like character in that he's able to dodge tackles. He's able to weave throughout defenders. I was impressed by his game enough to be excited about what he can do against Dallas next week.
I'm very excited as well. I thought he was a player who was going to be underrated and deliver. above and beyond expectations, but I have to give him a B minus. And the reason is because he didn't have that big of a body of work, and he had one really key drop where he had yards of open space in front of him.
This is true.
And if I'm grading, just every opportunity against every opportunity you get, and you miss an opportunity like that, I got to ding you some points. You get that, and you go 20, like it looked like he had in front of him. Maybe we bump that up to an A minus, even an A, because that would be working against the opportunity he was given. I think a lot of this is testament to the fact that I'm giving Chip Kelly about a C, especially for the first half. But yeah, Matthews, that big drop, that's key. Like if I was going to grade Austin, I would give him probably an F or a C minus because he had two opportunities and one of them was a big drop where he could have made some real damage. So for Matthews, I have to ding him in the same way.
Fair enough. We have two players left on the defensive side, and then we'll get into predictions about next week. I'll start off with Byron Maxwell. He was a guy that personally I was consistently disappointed in throughout the game. Number one, and I know this isn't something that happened during the game, but something that he was commented as saying was, I was going to sign wherever paid me the most. I didn't care about anything else. And what worries me there is that here's a guy who's already won the Super Bowl. So you can't really say that he's necessarily hungry to win because it's so hard to win a single Super Bowl, let alone two. And now that he already has a ring, my goodness, hard to blame him for really going after money, and he gets it in Philadelphia. And two is that, my goodness, he seemed burned on almost every Julio Jones play. Honestly, I'm going to go with a C minus for Byron Maxwell. I understand there were some plays that he played decently okay, but for a big free agent cornerback signing, I thought he was a massive disappointment. You expect a big free agent cornerback signing to blanket your team's the opposing team's best wide receiver. I saw very little out of him. Was he an improvement over Cary Williams? Was he an improvement over Bradley Fletcher? Sure. But he was still such a disappointment that I can't go anything above a C minus.
I might have to correct you. Most people would expect a highly touted free agent signing cornerback to perform very well right off the bat, but we in Philadelphia know a little bit better. So we have to temper our expectations, but I also have to give him a C minus, and it's when I talk about Matthews, it was executing against his opportunity. When I talk about Maxwell, similar to what you said, it's executing against his expectations. And if you're a big free agent signer, if you can't handle the heat, it's pretty tempting to take all that money. Sure, he's going to have a lot of money, but if he doesn't perform against it, we're not going to love him. And I want to love him. I really do. It must be said, again, really poor defensive line play, considering that they weren't even trying to establish the run. Atlanta wasn't. Not getting a lot of penetration. A good quarterback has a lot of time with great wide receivers. The real key in me bumping Maxwell down to a C minus is that he didn't just get burned by Julio Jones. He got burned by Roddy White, who's also a good receiver, but it wasn't like one guy just owns you, superior physical skills. He's going to get you every time one-on-one. It's up to your coach to make the adjustment. It's both of those guys kind of did a number on you.
Yeah.
And you're this big, you're like the fourth highest paid cornerback in the league. I didn't see Sherman, Hayden, Peterson, or Revis out there.
Right.
So, shoot, C minus. Lucky it's not an F.
So he was our big free agency guy, and the other way you can acquire players in any league is obviously a trade, which happens very rarely in the NFL, but occurred last season between the Bills and the Eagles. And this is the trade with Kiko Alonso and LaShawn McCoy. Now, I'll tell you what. I thought that Kiko Alonso had a Odell Beckham Jr.-esque catch in the red zone against the Atlanta Falcons this week. I was very impressed by that. Overall, I was decently impressed by him in joining tackles. I'm willing to give him an A minus. Any linebacker to me that can intercept the ball, that has decent hand skill, is able to get to the ball, is able to join in on tackles, I'm decently encouraged by his play. Is he quite the linebacker that I was hoping? No, not exactly. I was really hoping for the Kiko Alonso, Michael Kendrick, sort of D'Amico Ryans Mufasa role to really be these three unbelievable linebackers that were ball hawks and always on the ball. I wasn't blown out of the water by Kiko, but I'm willing to give him an A- for that interception and for his ability to get to the ball.
Yeah, I'll mirror that and give him an A- as well and match you for the last two. People might ding Kiko for the illegal touching, illegal contact penalty that he got that negated the fumble recovery post Sam Bradford interception to end the second half. I don't really ding him for that. Yeah, maybe by the rule books it's a penalty. Guy's a linebacker. He's going to touch people. We didn't really hear his name called that much. I also feel like that's kind of, at the linebacker position, that's kind of okay.
Right, that's a good thing.
You know,
right.
It's kind of like if you're an offensive guard, you don't want your name called that much.
Right.
If you're not getting any mention throughout the whole game, you're doing a really good job. Linebacker's not exactly the same because you can have those explosive one-handed catch interceptions in the end zone like he had.
Right.
But I think I'm not going to let the fact that his name didn't get called more and that I wasn't really paying attention to him cloud the fact that I think that means he had a really good game. And I'm not going to ding him much for that illegal contact penalty because whether or not that's a penalty, we need to do a better job more consistently. Shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. Shouldn't have thrown the interception. So I'm not going to ding him.
Cool. So we've now talked about the free agency grades in the offseason. Let's make one final prediction and let's talk about what's coming up this next week. So we saw the New York Football Giants last night lose to the Dallas Cowboys. And really, it was in the first half a game that they really should have sort of let get out of hand. They stayed in, and they, in the end, sort of lost it on their own. Dallas came away with the win, but it's really questionable whether they should have or not. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had the Eagles tonight where, my goodness, so many opportunities to win despite playing a pretty poor game, I thought, in the first half. This is going to be a very interesting matchup next week where you have Des Bryant out. You have Dallas coming off of a momentum game win and the Eagles coming off of sort of a momentum game loss. Who do you like next week? Talking about what you're going to see.
First of all, I never liked Dallas, but I am going to have to pick them in this game. And the reason isn't because I think compared to what I saw this week from them versus what I saw this week from the Eagles leads me to logically conclude that they will play better. It's more having watched the Eagles and kind of getting a feel for them and ultimately feeling like we will lose this game. Probably close, something like 3 points. It'll be something like 27-24, and we'll be better for it throughout the rest of the season. It'll hurt really bad, like it always does, but I just see that happening this week. I feel like our last week 2 matchup against Dallas was the Deshaun Jackson throws the ball behind him before he gets into the end zone, and you know, we're both looking like juggernauts, but Dallas clearly wins. It's another early season matchup with Dallas where something like that happens, and that ends up being a pretty decent, maybe just okay season for us. But I feel like this season in particular, we're the kind of team where we're going to stumble out of the starting block. It always seems to happen with teams with high expectations. It always seems to happen to the Eagles in particular. I wouldn't be surprised to see us 0-2. I wouldn't panic yet, especially depending on what I see, and I really hope I'm wrong. But I see Dallas 27-24.
Yeah, so I'll actually agree. I think that Dallas wins this game, and let me be clear here. I think that I made a prediction that the Eagles would win the NFC East, and I'm sticking with that. And I've also made the prediction that I think the Eagles can go something like 12-4, 13-3, and I'm also sticking with that. I think that when you look back at last season, we started off 2-0, very two close wins, probably 2 wins that we shouldn't have had. And we realized that, my goodness, sometimes winning those early games sort of does you a disservice because you're not learning the right things. I'm okay with now us having the rest of the season to look back at that critical 4th and 1 and say, my goodness, that's a decision we shouldn't have made. And even next week, I think it's totally reasonable to expect throughout the season that the Eagles are going to split the season series with Dallas. And if next week is our loss, again, I'm okay with that, and I'm not ready to hit the panic button. Am I rooting for Philadelphia? Of course. I think we all are here. But I'll agree with you. I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring. I think it's something probably more like a 32-30 as opposed to, I think what you said was 27-24, but I like that range. I think that Romo's probably going to have a pretty good game. I think Romo's probably just as good as Matt Ryan. He won't have Des Bryant next week, of course, which is a major concern for Dallas. But I agree. I think that Dallas wins, and I don't think it's quite ready yet to hit the panic button for Philadelphia. So with that analysis, we thank you guys for all tuning in. As always, please hit us up on eaglesfanwagon@gmail.com for any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, feelings, or emotions. And we look forward to talking to you next week. With that, I'm Erik Hansel.
I'm Greg Myer.
And thank you very much for tuning in.